Story disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction and is intended for entertainment purposes only. The content includes dark themes, horror elements, and fictional depictions of rituals and sacrifices that are purely imaginative and not reflective of any real-life practices or beliefs. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is not suitable for younger audiences, and parental guidance is recommended. The story does not endorse or promote any harmful behavior, violence, or dangerous activities. Please note that all characters, events, and settings are entirely fictional and created for the purpose of storytelling. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. In the heart of Kisa, three childhood friends, Amina, Amira, and Zara, are about to discover a secret that will change their lives forever. When Zara unearths an ancient, cursed book, the magic within it begins to stir, pulling them into a world of darkness and power. But as they unleash its secrets, the bond that once held them together begins to fracture. What has been awakened? And how far will they go to control the magic they've unleashed? Subscribe, like, share, and hit the notification bell so you are notified when we upload new episodes. The sun was setting over the city of Kisa, casting long shadows across the bustling streets. The air was thick with the scent of street food and the hum of everyday life. But for Amina, Amira, and Zara, the world around them felt different. Something had shifted, though they couldn't yet explain it. It started as a whisper, an unsettling feeling, a tugging at their very souls. Three women, bound by a history of friendship and secrets, each felt the pull of something ancient, something dark. They had been close since childhood, their lives intertwined like the roots of the trees that lined the streets of Kisa. But recently, the air between them had changed. There was an unspoken tension. Amina was the first to notice. Her dreams had been vivid, nightmarish even, filled with images of shadowy figures and glowing symbols. She had always been sensitive to the energy around her, but now, the energy felt heavier, darker. And it wasn't just her. Amira, the intellectual of the trio, had been doing extensive research in the city's archives, uncovering old texts and forgotten legends about dark magic. Zara, the most daring of the three, had become more restless, her usual calm demeanor replaced with moments of sudden anger. They met in the old house at the edge of the city, a place that was both familiar and strange, its walls steeped in the memories of their youth. It was Zara who had insisted on the meeting. "The magic is here," Zara said, her voice low, almost a whisper, as they sat around the dusty table. She pulled out a small, weathered book she had found hidden in the attic of her family home. Its cover was black, the symbols on it unfamiliar, but the moment her fingers touched it, Zara felt a surge of power. Amira frowned. "Are you sure this is it?" she asked, eyeing the book warily. "It looks old. Dangerous." Amina stared at the book, feeling a strange pull toward it, the familiar sense of longing she couldn't explain. "It's more than that," she murmured. "It's calling us." Zara nodded. "It's time." Time for what? Amina didn't know, but deep inside, she felt it. This book was the key. It held the answers to questions they hadn't yet asked. Magic that had been dormant for centuries was awakening, and they were at the center of it. With trembling hands, Zara opened the book. The pages were filled with strange symbols, a language none of them could read. But as they stared at the ancient script, the room grew colder, the shadows lengthening. The air thickened, pressing down on them like a heavy weight. Without warning, a flash of light filled the room. The book began to glow, and suddenly, the women felt it, the magic. It surged through them like a storm, wild and untamed. Amina gasped as a sharp pain coursed through her body, her skin burning with energy. Amira clutched her head, her vision blurring. Zara, though, looked exhilarated. She was no longer the friend they had known. She was something else now. And in that moment, they realized that nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, Amina woke with a start. Her body felt heavy, like she was wading through thick water. Her head throbbed, and there was a strange taste in her mouth, metallic, bitter. As she sat up, she noticed the marks on her arms, symbols, glowing faintly beneath her skin. They were the same symbols from the book Zara had found. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't imagining it. The magic was real. When Amina met with Amira and Zara later that day, neither of them spoke about what had happened. They didn't need to. They could all feel the shift in their lives. Amira, usually composed and logical, had been shaken. Her hands trembled as she touched the symbols on her arm, as if trying to comprehend the reality of what had happened. Zara, on the other hand, seemed almost triumphant. "We are powerful now," she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "We've been chosen." Chosen for what? Amina couldn't shake the feeling that Zara knew more than she was letting on. And that's when the first curse came. It started with a whisper. Amina heard it as she walked through the crowded streets of Kisa, the sound drifting from a dark alleyway. "Help me." The voice was faint, but urgent. She followed the sound, stepping into the shadows, her heart pounding. There, in the alley, she saw a woman kneeling in the dirt, her hands bound. Her eyes were wide with terror, her lips moving in frantic prayer. "Please help me," the woman whispered again. Amina's hand reached out, drawn to the woman. She couldn't explain why, but she knew this was a test. This was the first curse. The magic was not just about power, it was about choice. Zara's words echoed in her mind, "We've been chosen." But chosen for what? And what was the cost? In the days that followed, the magic began to take hold. At first, it was subtle. Amina found that she could move objects with a flick of her wrist. Amira's research into ancient spells became more accurate, and Zara was different. Her magic was stronger, faster. She could summon fire with a snap of her fingers, her laughter echoing in the night air. But with power came consequences. Strange things started happening around the city. People went missing. Buildings burned overnight. The local authorities couldn't explain it, but Amina, Amira, and Zara knew better. The curse had been set in motion. And the dark magic that had once felt like a gift was now something far more dangerous. The magic was feeding on their fears and their desires. It was twisting them. One night, as they gathered in their secret hideaway, Zara's face turned pale. "We need to be careful," she whispered. "The magic is testing us." Amina and Amira exchanged uneasy glances. But they had no choice now. They had unleashed something they couldn't contain. Something dark. The next few days blurred together in a haze of fear and anticipation. Amina felt the darkness inside her, an unsettling presence that whispered when she was alone. She couldn't explain it, but she knew the magic they had unleashed was growing stronger. Amira had begun isolating herself, spending long hours in the old library, poring over the ancient texts she had discovered. Her obsession with understanding the magic was clear, but she was also becoming more distant. Zara, however, was thriving. She had embraced the power, allowing it to shape her every decision. The more they learned about the magic, the deeper they fell into its grip. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Zara gathered them in the attic of the old house. Her face was pale, her eyes alight with an eerie intensity. "We have to make a choice," Zara said, her voice trembling with excitement. "The magic demands it. We can control it, or it will control us." Amina's heart raced. The thought of making a pact with the magic was terrifying, but it seemed they had no choice. Amira hesitated, her brow furrowed as she considered the consequences. "If we refuse," Amina whispered, "what happens to us?" Zara smiled. If we refuse, we lose everything. The pact was made, though unspoken. The dark magic had found its way into their souls, and there was no turning back. After the pact, the changes were immediate. The power surged through Amina, Amira, and Zara, but with it came a deeper darkness. Amina's dreams were haunted by visions of destruction, fire, death, and chaos. Amira was tormented by an unshakable feeling of dread, as if something was watching her from the shadows. Zara, though, seemed unstoppable. She had become more powerful than any of them, but at a terrible cost. The first test came when they were summoned by the spirits that had been awakened. One night, a cold breeze swept through the house, and a voice called out to them from the darkness. "The time has come," the voice whispered. It was an invitation. A challenge. They had to prove their worth, or suffer the consequences. They followed the voice to an abandoned part of the city, a place where no one dared to go. The streets were empty, the buildings crumbling in the night. As they approached an old, decrepit church, the air grew thick with tension. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, cloaked in darkness. "You are the chosen ones," the figure said, its voice hollow. "But to truly master the magic, you must pass the test." Amira stepped forward, her hand trembling as she raised it. "What test?" she demanded. The figure's eyes gleamed beneath its hood. "A test of loyalty. A test of power. A test of the soul." Without warning, the ground beneath them cracked open, and shadows rose up like tendrils, wrapping around their feet. They were trapped. The shadows closed in, tightening around Amina, Amira, and Zara. Each of them felt the weight of the curse. It was suffocating, pulling at their very essence. Amina gasped as the shadows began to whisper in her ear, feeding on her deepest fears. "You will betray each other," the shadows hissed. "No," Amina whispered, fighting back the rising panic. "We are stronger than this." Zara was the first to break free, her magic erupting like a burst of flame, sending the shadows retreating. She looked at Amina with a strange expression, something darker than before. "We are strong," Zara said, but her voice held a note of something far more sinister. Amira had been silent, watching them both, her face pale. "We need to understand what we've done," she said. "The magic, it's not just a tool, it's controlling us." The shadows vanished, leaving the women standing in the wreckage of the old church. The test was not over, though. It had only just begun. The following days were filled with tension and uncertainty. Amina, Zara, and Amira felt the weight of their choices pressing down on them. The darkness that had once been a whisper now felt like a constant presence, lurking in the corners of their minds. Zara's power had grown exponentially. It was as though the pact had transformed her. She moved with an air of confidence, the darkness no longer a threat, but something she could control. Amina couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, watching Zara's transformation. She was becoming less human and more something else entirely. But the real fear began when Zara spoke one night, her voice low and filled with foreboding. "We must prepare for the blood moon," she said, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the attic. "It's the only way to truly harness the magic." Amira, who had been silent for days, finally spoke up. "The blood moon. You know what that means, don't you?" Zara nodded. "It means we will perform the ritual. The magic will be ours, but at a price." Amina's heart raced. She had heard of the blood moon, the rare celestial event that occurred once every few years. It was said that during this time, the veil between the living and the dead thinned, and the magic that could be harnessed was both powerful and dangerous. "That's a dangerous path," Amina said, her voice trembling. "We could lose ourselves to it." Zara turned to her, her expression cold but resolute. "We've already lost so much. This is the only way to gain the power we need to protect ourselves, to control the magic before it controls us. The night of the blood moon arrived, and the sky was awash in a deep red hue. The three friends gathered in the same attic, the air thick with tension. Zara had drawn symbols in the dust on the floor, and the candles flickered in the stillness. "This is it," Zara said quietly. "Once we begin, there's no turning back." As the blood moon rose higher in the sky, the air around them seemed to grow heavier, charged with an energy that made Amina's skin prickle. The ritual had begun. Zara stood at the center of the circle, her arms raised toward the sky. Amira, standing to her left, had her eyes closed, her hands trembling slightly as she murmured words of ancient incantation under her breath. Amina stood at the edge of the circle, watching in silent dread as the darkness around them began to shift and writhe like a living thing. The shadows cast by the candles seemed to stretch and dance, moving unnaturally across the floor, swirling around them in a hypnotic pattern. The magic was growing stronger, its pull undeniable. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet rumbled, and a deep, otherworldly voice echoed through the room. "You dare to summon me, mortal children?" Amina gasped, stepping back, but Zara remained unmoved. She stared up at the blood moon, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of fear and power. "You have come to claim my power, haven't you?" the voice continued, now more like a growl. The shadows seemed to curl and twist, forming a shape at the center of the circle, a figure, cloaked in darkness, with glowing red eyes. Zara didn't flinch. "We seek the power to control the magic. To protect ourselves and take what is rightfully ours." The figure's eyes glowed brighter. "And what will you give me in return?" Amina's heart stopped. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. This was the moment when they had to make the ultimate sacrifice. Amira's voice trembled as she spoke. "What do you want?" The dark figure smiled, and the air seemed to grow colder. "A life. One of you must offer themselves to me." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The offer hung in the air like a dark cloud, suffocating all the hope and light in the room. The dark figure's red eyes flickered, waiting, as the three friends stood frozen, staring at the ground beneath them. Amina felt a chill run down her spine. "One of us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Zara's expression was hard, unflinching. She had already made up her mind. "It's the only way," Zara said coldly. "We can't back down now. The magic is too powerful to resist." Amira's hands trembled as she looked between the two of them. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was a hint of resignation behind them. She had always known that magic, but especially dark magic, came with a price. But the reality of it, the true cost, was something none of them had anticipated. Zara turned to face the dark figure. "We offer ourselves," she said, her voice strong. "But you must grant us the power to control the magic. All of it." The figure's eyes gleamed with amusement. "So be it." Suddenly, the room was filled with a blinding light, and the ground trembled beneath them. Amina felt as though she were being pulled into the earth, her body heavy and cold. Amira let out a gasp, but Zara stood tall, her eyes blazing with the same power that had consumed her since the pact was made. The figure's laughter echoed through the room, a sound that sent shivers down Amina's spine. "You have made your choice," the figure said. "And now, you will pay the price." When the light faded and the ground stopped shaking, Amina found herself kneeling on the floor, her hands trembling. She could feel the weight of the magic coursing through her veins, stronger than ever before. It was as if something had awakened inside her, a dark power that she couldn't control. She glanced over at Zara. The transformation was more pronounced now. Her once warm, brown eyes were now a glowing, unnatural red. She moved with an eerie grace, like someone who had been granted eternal life. Amina couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as she looked at her friend. Zara had become something else entirely. "We've done it," Zara said, her voice soft and distant, as though she was speaking from another world. "We have the power. The city is ours." Amira, on the other hand, was struggling. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. "Zara, we didn't know what we were signing up for. The price, it's too high." Zara didn't answer. Instead, she turned away and walked toward the window, her eyes fixed on the city below. Amina followed her gaze, feeling a cold sweat break out on her skin. The city was alive, its streets bustling with people unaware of the dark forces that now controlled it. And then, as Zara's shadow stretched over the city, Amina knew that the battle had only just begun. The city lay beneath them like a sleeping giant. Its streets stretched out in all directions, unaware of the dark forces now stirring at its core. Zara's transformation had been swift, and the magic that she now controlled was palpable in the air around them. It was like a heavy fog that clung to everything, a reminder that their lives would never be the same again. Amina couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. She had seen Zara change before her very eyes, but she never imagined it would be this drastic. There was an air of cruelty about her now, as though the magic had twisted her soul into something cold and unrecognizable. "Zara, we need to talk," Amina said, her voice tight with concern. Zara turned to her, her red eyes glowing faintly in the dark room. "About what?" Amina hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "This power, it's consuming you. The pact we made, the blood moon ritual, it was more than we could handle. You don't even seem like the same person anymore." Zara laughed, but there was no joy in it. "You're wrong, Amina. I'm more than I've ever been. I can feel the magic flowing through me, controlling me, but I'm also controlling it. This is what we always wanted, wasn't it? Power. Strength. Freedom from the fear that's haunted us all our lives. But at what cost?" Amina's voice was sharp, filled with fear. "Amira's right. We gave up too much." Zara's expression hardened. "You fear what you don't understand. I've seen the future, Amina. I've seen what we are capable of. The city, the people, they'll bow before us. We are more than just mortals now. We have the ability to shape reality itself." Amina felt a shiver run down her spine. The words were intoxicating, but they were also terrifying. They had always been outsiders, living on the fringes of society. But now they were something much darker, something that could bend the world to their will. And yet, with that power came the risk of losing themselves entirely. Zara's gaze drifted out the window again, her eyes narrowed as if she were watching the city below, waiting for something. "Tomorrow, we begin," Zara murmured. "The city doesn't know what's coming, but it will soon." Amina swallowed hard. "What are you planning?" Zara's lips curled into a wicked smile. "I'm planning to take it all." As night descended over the city, the first signs of change were subtle. People began to feel restless. Some would speak of a chill in the air, others would feel an overwhelming sense of dread as if something was watching them. It was the kind of feeling that made you glance over your shoulder, only to find no one there. Amina couldn't help but feel it too. She and Zara sat together in the attic, the only place in the house that remained untouched by the darkness that now surrounded them. Amira had been distant for days, barely speaking except to agree with Zara's increasingly dark plans. It was as if the magic had taken hold of her too, but in a different way. She was quieter now, more withdrawn, almost like she was fading away from the world around her. "You've seen the signs, haven't you?" Zara asked, her voice low and full of excitement. "The magic is beginning to spread. People will begin to turn. Their willpower will falter. The city will surrender to us." Amina glanced at her friend, the woman who had been like a sister to her for years, now unrecognizable. You mean, we are going to force them? Zara smiled, her red eyes gleaming. Not force. Persuade. The magic will make them willing. It's all about subtlety. People will crave power, and we will be the ones to give it to them. They'll join us, or they'll fall. Amina swallowed hard. The truth was, she hadn't signed up for this. The idea of using dark magic to control people, manipulate their minds, felt wrong. And yet, she knew there was no going back. They had made their choice. Zara stood up and walked to the window, her face illuminated by the blood-red moon. Tomorrow, we begin with the first wave. We'll infiltrate the city's leadership. They'll be the first to kneel. Amina didn't say anything, but she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pretending to be a part of this plan. The next morning, Zara and Amina, accompanied by Amira, set out into the city. It was as if the world was holding its breath. Amina could feel the magic thrumming around her, but she also felt the weight of the choices they had made. They arrived at the headquarters of one of the city's most influential leaders, a man named Obina. He was a wealthy businessman, known for his political influence and vast fortune. It was said that he could sway the city's government with a mere word. Zara had chosen him as their first target, and Amina wasn't sure whether to be terrified or intrigued. "Let me do the talking," Zara said as they approached the gates of Obina's mansion. "You follow my lead." Amina nodded, though her heart was racing. They were about to perform the first act of their dark magic in full view of the world. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she was certain that whatever happened next would change everything. Obina's mansion was guarded by two massive iron gates, but Zara walked up to them without hesitation. With a wave of her hand, the gates creaked open, as though they were being controlled by some invisible force. As they stepped inside, Amina could feel the tension building. They were in the heart of the city now, where the power of the magic could easily spread. She glanced at Zara, whose expression remained calm, almost detached. The doors to the mansion opened, revealing Obina himself. He was a tall man, well-dressed and confident, but there was a coldness to his eyes that immediately sent a chill down Amina's spine. "Well, if it isn't the young witches," Obina said, his voice smooth and mocking. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Zara smiled, her red eyes gleaming. "We are here to offer you something. Power. Influence. Everything you've ever wanted." Obina laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "I already have all the power I need, little girl. What could you possibly offer me?" Amina could feel the air growing colder, the dark magic swirling around them. Zara stepped forward, her voice taking on a hypnotic quality. "We can give you everything. But only if you're willing to pay the price." Obina's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "What price?" "The price of your loyalty," Zara said, her voice barely a whisper. "Your soul." Obina's gaze darkened, his confident facade sleeping for just a moment. There was a brief flash of fear in his eyes that Amina caught, and it sent an icy chill down her spine. This wasn't a man who feared much, but something about Zara's words made him uneasy. "The price of my soul?" Obina scoffed, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You think I would trade my life for some dark promises?" Zara's red eyes flickered. "It's not just promises, Obina. It's power. Power that can bend the world to your will. Everything you've ever wanted. The people of this city will bow before you, worship you, all if you accept what we offer." Obina took a step back, his expression tight with suspicion. "And what exactly are you offering? What makes you think I need a deal with witches to succeed?" Zara's smile grew wider, her lips curling in a sinister, almost predatory way. "What you have now is fleeting. Wealth, influence, control, they can all vanish in the blink of an eye. But this, she gestured to the air around them, her hand moving like she was manipulating invisible strings. This is eternal. And it's not just for you. We'll make sure your name will live forever. But first, you must prove your loyalty. Obina hesitated, clearly torn. The offer was tempting, too tempting to ignore. He had always craved more power, more influence, more control over the city that had long been eluding his grasp. But there was something about the dark magic that made him wary, something sinister beneath the surface. Amina watched the exchange, her heart pounding. The air around them was charged, thick with the dark magic Zara was wielding. She could feel it pressing in, weighing down on her, and it made her chest tighten with anxiety. Finally, Obina spoke, his voice low and measured. "What do you want from me?" Zara's smile widened as if she had been waiting for this moment. "The same thing you want from us. Power. But you'll pay the price by agreeing to serve us. Your life will be ours in return for everything you could ever desire. And when you accept, you will become part of the city's new order." Obina's hands clenched into fists, his mind racing. He knew what Zara was offering was dangerous, but the temptation to control the city, to become untouchable, was almost too much to resist. The dark magic swirled around them like a living thing, pressing into the room, twisting reality. Zara's eyes burned like embers in the dark, and Amina couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment, the decision Obina was about to make. "I accept," Obina finally said, his voice steady but his hands trembling slightly. Amina watched as Zara moved with smooth grace, her fingers weaving an unseen spell. In an instant, a flash of crimson light enveloped the room, and the pact was sealed. Obina's body stiffened, his eyes glazing over as the dark magic took hold of him. For a brief moment, he seemed to shake as though fighting something within, but it passed quickly. When the light faded, Zara turned to Amina, a dark glint in her eye. "It's done. Obina is ours now." Amina felt a deep unease. She had watched this unfold, had seen the price of power firsthand. But as they left the mansion, she could sense the ripple of the magic spreading across the city. This was just the beginning. Zara had taken the first step toward something much darker, and Amina wasn't sure how far they would go before they couldn't turn back. The next few days passed in a haze for Amina. The pact with Obina had been made, and the city was already starting to feel the effects. People began to act strangely, more subdued, more docile. It wasn't immediately obvious, but those with power could sense it. Zara's magic was spreading, subtly taking hold of the minds of the city's elite. Amina spent her time in silence, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were descending into something far darker than she had ever anticipated. Zara's transformation into a power-hungry sorceress was undeniable, and Amina could feel herself being drawn deeper into her orbit. But she still held on to a shred of resistance. She hadn't yet fully given into the allure of the magic. Amira, on the other hand, was a different story. Her silence was more than just contemplation, it was as if the magic had claimed her entirely. She rarely spoke now, her eyes distant, her movements slower. Amina feared that Amira had already surrendered, that the darkness had consumed her completely. They gathered once more, this time in the attic, the only place where the dark magic hadn't seeped into every corner of their home. Zara was speaking again, her voice smooth and calculating as always. "The city is ripe for the taking," Zara said, her eyes glinting with ambition. "Tomorrow, we move on the second tier of leadership. We'll target the business moguls, the ones who control the money. Once they are under our influence, nothing can stop us." Amina listened in silence, but her stomach churned. It was as if the air had turned sour, filled with a sense of dread. The more Zara spoke, the more the weight of their choices became clear. They were on a path that they couldn't easily turn away from. "We need to be careful," Amina finally spoke up, her voice low. There are others out there who could sense what we're doing. We can't keep this hidden forever. Zara's gaze flickered toward her. You worry too much, Amina. We are beyond the reach of those who would try to stop us. Once we have control over the city, no one will be able to challenge us. Not the government, not the people, no one. Amina's heart sank. She had been hoping that Zara would see reason, but it was clear that the magic had taken over. Zara wasn't just seeking power anymore, she was obsessed with it. As Zara left to prepare for the next phase, Amina stood by the window, her mind racing. What had they done? What kind of future were they building? She wasn't sure, but one thing was certain, this was only the beginning. The night had fallen heavy, casting shadows that seemed to whisper secrets into the darkness. Amina couldn't shake the feeling that the city had changed overnight. People moved differently, their gazes dull and distant as if something had shifted within them. It wasn't just the powerful elite anymore, there was a subtle, ominous influence spreading across every corner of the city. The following morning, Amina and Amira walked through the market, their faces cloaked under the cover of their scarves, blending into the crowds. They had learned to be careful, moving as unnoticed as possible. Zara's dark magic was growing stronger, and with each passing day, Amina felt more trapped. Amira, do you feel it? Amina whispered, her voice strained. Amira nodded, her eyes vacant. It's in the air. Like the city's alive in a way it never was before. Amina glanced around, the pulse of energy in the streets pressing down on her chest like a heavy weight. The market, once filled with laughter and bright colors, now felt suffocated, like it was under some kind of dark, depressive spell. The sky was overcast, the sun blocked by thick clouds that seemed unnatural, as though they, too, were drawn to the growing darkness. They stopped by a vendor selling flowers, and Amina picked up a single purple blossom, its petals withering at her touch. Do you think the magic is taking hold faster than we thought? Amina asked, her eyes still on the wilted flower. Amira didn't answer right away. She stared at the flower for a moment, her expression blank. Then she slowly turned her gaze toward Amina, and the silence between them grew heavy. I don't know, Amira replied quietly, almost as if she were trying to convince herself. But I think it's more than just Zara's influence now. The words struck a chord in Amina. She had been so focused on the immediate danger Zara posed, the power she was gaining, that she hadn't stopped to consider that the magic could be affecting more than just the people they encountered. It was like a rippling effect, spreading from the core of Zara's plans, reaching into every corner of the city, affecting everything it touched. Suddenly, a sharp, chilling voice interrupted her thoughts. You're too late. Amina and Amira turned in unison, and standing before them was a woman, draped in dark robes that swirled with the breeze. Her hair was long, cascading down her back like a river of night, and her eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating light. The woman's presence was unmistakable, she was no ordinary mortal. There was magic about her, dark and ancient. Who are you? Amina demanded, her voice filled with warning. The woman laughed softly, almost mockingly, and took a step closer. I am the one who was forgotten. The one who has waited. And now, you're too late. Amira stiffened beside Amina, and Amina could feel the weight of the woman's power pressing in on them. She felt her own magic star, pushing back in response, but it was weaker, less focused than the woman's. What do you mean? Amina asked, her heart pounding in her chest. The magic Zara has embraced has roots that run much deeper than she realizes. It's not just her influence. You see, this city was built upon the bones of the forgotten, and we, the magic of the old world, have always been here. Watching. Waiting. The woman's voice was like ice flowing through Amina's veins, her words laced with a truth that sent a ripple of fear through Amina. She could feel the ancient power rising just beneath the surface of Zara's dark magic, and it terrified her. "We must stop this," Amina whispered to Amira, but her friend seemed lost in the moment, as if the woman's words were already sinking in. "Not yet," Amira said, her voice distant. "Not yet." The woman smiled darkly and raised her hand. "Zara has her own plans, but there are others, ancient forces that have always been here. The magic you're meddling with, it was never meant to be controlled. And if you continue down this path, you will find that some doors, once opened, can never be closed." With a flick of her wrist, the woman disappeared into the shadows as quickly as she had come, leaving Amina and Amira standing in the market, the cold touch of her words lingering in the air. The encounter with the mysterious woman had left Amina shaken, and she couldn't stop thinking about the implications of what had been said. There was something older, darker, beneath Zara's magic, something that had been dormant for centuries, waiting for this moment to rise. And Amina couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking directly into the storm. Days passed, and Amina and Amira kept their distance from Zara, trying to understand the depths of the power they were dealing with. The city's mood shifted further, as if it had fallen under some kind of trance. People moved through the streets in a daze, their eyes glassy and distant, as if their will had been stripped away. But it wasn't just the city's inhabitants. Zara herself had become more erratic. At times, her face would light up with gleeful triumph, and then suddenly, she would seem to retreat inward, lost in a deep, dark trance. Amina had heard rumors about the price Zara was paying for her magic, the toll it was taking on her soul, but now, Amina feared that Zara wasn't the only one paying. One night, Amina awoke to a sound, the low, almost imperceptible hum of dark energy. She could feel it in the walls of the house, in the very air around her. The magic was growing, spreading like a virus through the city, consuming everything in its path. Amira had been strangely quiet, withdrawn, and Amina feared that she had already fallen under Zara's spell. As Amina paced the floor, her thoughts raced. She needed to find out more about the ancient forces the woman had spoken of. She needed to find a way to stop Zara before the darkness consumed them all. Will Amina succeed at stopping Zara before the darkness consumes them all? Find out in the next episode.